Televiziunea Română, întâlnirile JTI și Fundația Art Production vă recomandă Garantat 100%.
Salutare, bine v-am regăsit la Garantat 100%. Invitatul nostru e un personaj celebru în toată lumea. A fost bancher, a lucrat în mari bănci elvețiene, iar la un moment dat a denunțat anumite practici ilegale. Pe scurt, invitatul nostru ajuta oameni foarte bogați să depună sume imense de bani în conturi secrete, în bănci elvețiene, pentru a evita plata taxelor. Dezvăluirile sale au avut ca rezultat recuperarea de către autoritățile americane a câtorva miliarde de dolari. La rândul său a fost găsit vinovat petrecând 2 ani și jumătate în închisoare. La câteva săptămâni de la ieșirea din închisoare, în 2012, fiscul american i-a dat cel mai mare premiu în bani pe care l-a primit vreodată o persoană care a denunțat o evaziune fiscală. 104 milioane de dolari. De atunci călătorește în întreaga lume, ține conferințe și susține organizații umanitare. Domnia sa se află în România la invitația editurii Minerva pentru lansarea cărții sale Bancherul, diavolului. Doamnelor și domnilor, invitatul nostru este cel mai mare avertizor fiscal din istorie. Fostul bancher Bradley Birkenfeld. Hello, thank you so much for accepting this invitation.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
How are you? You're okay?
I love Romania. I love coming back to Bucharest. It's a wonderful city and a wonderful country, so I'm having a great time.
Okay, good to hear that. Max Birkenfeld, your grandfather.
That's correct.
What a character.
Yes.
What a character, what a man. He was born in the historical Bukovina in Romania. I mean, you have deep Romanian roots.
That's correct, and it's such a pleasure to be here, and that's why I had my book translated to Romanian, because of my grandfather Max, who, along with his mother and his 2 half-sisters, emigrated to America back in 1922.
Your father, Ronald Birkenfeld, a neurosurgeon.
That's correct. A very prestigious neurosurgeon in America. He's helped thousands of people over decades who've had brain surgeries and so forth, and he's been a great addition to the community over those decades.
And you're a graduate of the Norwich University from Vermont, the oldest private military academy in the US.
Yes, it was quite an experience, and I think for most Romanians, they understand that the military, as part of your background, your educational background, is important because it gives you the stability and the foundation for later in life.
So that was a real help, as a matter of fact.
Absolutely, and I made a lot of great friends there. I didn't go into the military. I chose not to. Yep. I was actually too tall to be in a fighter pilot, so I elected to go into the private sector.
Yep. So eventually you became a banker. How was your life as a banker in Switzerland?
Well, I was a banker first in America,
Yep.
so the difference between Switzerland and America from investment banking to private banking was totally different, opposite ends of the spectrum, as we say. But in Switzerland, I found it to be very conducive to a nice lifestyle, first and foremost. Switzerland was a clean and safe country,
Yep.
very rich country, and it had a lot of qualities in the private banking sector with respect to the history of private banking. So I had a very good life, a lot of vacation time, 2-hour lunches with wine, smoking Cuban cigars.
Was it a movie-like life?
Looking back on it, at the time I never thought that I was so gifted, and I was very fortunate. I always say that, and most of my friends remember me saying this, saying that we have a great lifestyle here, probably one of the best in the world, because it was a fantasy lifestyle of great salary, meeting very interesting people, traveling the world, gourmet food, and a luxury lifestyle.
Do you miss that?
I don't, actually, because I don't like working for big corporations anymore.
Okay. Among other important banks you've been working for, you've been working with Union des Banques Suisses, UBS. How would you describe UBS?
If your audience goes to my website, lucifersbanker.com, and look at the UBS scandals, and just the fines that UBS has paid over the last 6 or 7 years, you'll see it's in the billions of dollars. not just in America, but in France, in Germany, in many other countries, in Japan. Why is a firm like this continuing to conduct business when they're paying all these millions and millions in fines? So this is a very serious point, and I make this point because I think it's important for your audience to understand that the banks continue to do this, and I think the people in general are upset with this because they're paying the price, whether it's the shareholders or the clients of the bank, or both.
Don't they sue you if you call them like that?
They can't sue me for that because I have the evidence. In America, for instance, they paid $780 million fine for breaking the law.
Yeah.
And again, on my website, you'll see the deferred prosecution agreement, which obviously they were politically connected, so they got this. And now in France, for instance, I helped the French government. There's 1.2 billion in escrow in France on tax evasion and money laundering. These are very serious allegations, which are supported with a lot of evidence, and I testified in Paris for 10 hours.
Yep.
So I know exactly what these firms are doing, and UBS in particular, as well as Greece. I helped the Greek government as well, testified in the Greek embassy. So I think it's important for people to understand all of these scenarios, and until the banks clean their act up, they're still going to continue doing this business because they can just write a check.
But Mr. Birkenfeld, you've been working for some years for UBS, and you said at a certain moment in your book, a key line, I send my conscience in a holiday. How was that?
Well, in Switzerland, people have to remember private banking secrecy was legal in Switzerland. You could go and put money and never pay tax again, and that was legal. The problem came is when bankers like myself would go outside the country, whether it was to America or to Germany or France, because those countries, sovereign nations, have their own particular laws. And those were being violated. So that's where the question came in. If I just stayed in Switzerland and continued to do my business, there was nothing illegal. It's in the Constitution, it's legal in Switzerland. So that's the difference that people have to understand. So I started questioning this to my compliance and legal departments as a director when I said, it doesn't seem right what we're doing here, I need some clarification. And when I got no clarification, I complained and then I resigned.
Okay, in very simple words, what were you doing exactly as a banker in Switzerland?
There's three major roles I had as the director of key clients. A key client is someone with 25 million and above, worldwide assets. Not necessarily that they had them all with us, but we knew that they were that wealthy. The first thing was to acquire new clients, manage existing clients, and then offer products and services to the clients that would be attractive to them, whether it would be, say, an offshore trust, possibly a ski chalet, maybe developing their business better with cross-referencing with clients, whether if you were in the hotel industry, we would try and find people to sell you hotels, and so forth. So this was a type of investment banking overlaid on private banking. Not many people did it in Switzerland. I did it because I understood the only way to make money for a client was help them with their underlying business.
But you were also doing sort of secret banking.
Oh, clearly. This was absolutely Swiss private banking was secrecy. We had numbered accounts. We had offshore trusts and companies. We made sure that they were hidden in such a way that it was protecting the client. Just like you would have attorney-client privilege or medical privilege, we had banking privilege. Unfortunately, the banking privilege over the years was abused.
Protecting from what?
Well, maybe from a lawsuit from an ex-business partner, maybe an ex-wife or an ex-husband, and so forth. Now, clearly, a lot of people hid their money from the taxman, and that's obvious. But there's a lot of people that just don't need to know how much money they have. Some people get kidnapped, some people get killed. This happens, not all the time, but it's certainly a very important point to understand. So there are valid reasons to have offshore money and offshore companies. A lot of them are legitimate. It's the illegitimate ones that are really abusing the system.
I'll give you an example of one of your clients, Mr. Igor Olenikov, who was one of your major clients.
That's correct.
Who is Mr. Olenikov, as a matter of fact?
Well, he's a tax cheat. He's cheated on his taxes long before I ever met him. So back in Barclays, Bahamas, which I had nothing to do with, he was hiding hundreds of millions of dollars there.
We're talking about huge amounts of money, as a matter of fact.
Massive amounts. Now, he's a billionaire, so your audience understands. But that makes it even more egregious, because when you're that rich, do you really need to evade your taxes? Well, he felt this way. He felt as though he had to evade his taxes. So This was going on long before I even met him, and I was referred to him by the Barclays Bank Bahamas banker, my equal, when I was at Barclays Bank Geneva. So what happened was I then was recruited to UBS and brought him with me. Clearly what I was doing was acquiring assets, as I said. That was my job, and helping existing clients build their business. So he was one of my big clients, yes.
Why did you decide to disclose secret banking? I mean, this type of information for the American authorities.
Well, the first thing was UBS was lying to myself, to my colleagues, to our clients, and to the shareholders. That's the first thing. That's very important to understand. Whether a spouse lies to you, a business partner lies to you, your employer lies to you, do you still want to work with them? No, most likely not. So this was an egregious lie. The second thing was we found a secret document hidden in our intranet, which was a 3-page document, which contradicted everything we were doing.
What was that about?
Well, it, in essence, said you cannot go to the U.S. and bring account opening forms. You cannot cold call clients to try and attract new clients and so on and so forth. But they never told us about this document. They never trained us on the document. But in fact, they kept raising the amount of money we had to bring in as our barrier every year for every banker. So how are we supposed to bring in money if you're putting restrictions on us like this and not telling us about those restrictions? So that's really where the problem arose. And when I challenged it, as a director of the bank, I got no answer from legal or compliance over a 3-month period, asking every month for an answer in writing.
Wasn't that a matter of revenge?
No, it was a matter of principle.
Okay.
I mean, people look at it as revenge and they say, oh, you were just vindictive, you were angry. I was making over $1 million a year. I had a great lifestyle. And I quit. I wasn't fired. So quite frankly, why would I give that lifestyle up to expose the lies that they were perpetuating? And like I said, now what you have seen after is not only the demise of Swiss bank secrecy due to my historic whistleblowing, but you've seen hundreds of billions of dollars leave Switzerland. You've seen banks go bankrupt. The unemployment rate has risen as a result. Now, I'm just giving you facts so that you understand the magnitude of what I did, and I think it's important to understand. But what UBS and Switzerland was doing for so long was cheating the system, meaning they weren't playing on a level playing field with Romania, with England, France, America, and so forth. They had a monopoly on secrecy, and they abused that privilege.
What was the practical result of your deal with the American authorities?
Well, I later found out I couldn't trust the American authorities. They're as corrupt as the Swiss were.
Were you promised a deal?
Well, they never make promises. They'll always tell you things, the American authorities. But you would assume you could go to your own government and help them, not have them betray you, which my government did. Now, you have to understand I exposed 19,000 clients and $20 billion in assets, which included people like the Central Intelligence Agency, the NSA. These types of folks were laundering money through Switzerland for years. And you can go back and look at Iran-Contra during Ronald Reagan as proof that the American government is very corrupt in laundering drug money through Switzerland. So I felt it was...
It's a tough allegation.
Oh, no, it's a fact. If you can look at the Iran-Contra situation, that they were moving monies through there, and they've admitted it in hearings, and there's many more documents to prove that. And I worked there for 15 years in Switzerland, so I saw a lot of things, knew a lot of bankers and so forth. But I'm not here to make just random allegations. These are actually true. And of course, what's happened is the United States government took my information and then turned on me. They wanted to take the credit. What people have to understand, and your audience has to understand, is people, the bureaucrats in Washington, want to take the credit. If they can't take the credit, they don't want to be a part of it. The second thing is they don't need some young guy like me coming in and saying, I'm exposing the largest and longest tax fraud in the world. Where have you been for the last 10 years, 20 years? Why didn't you uncover it? Why did it take one single person to step forward and do the courageous thing to expose this? So then they turned on me, and no other banker in the entire financial crisis went to prison. Not one. Nobody at UBS went to jail, except the whistleblower, me. So that tells you something about how corrupted and the collusion that goes on within the U.S. government. Because you can imagine, the minimum account size of these accounts was $1 million, and there was 19,000 of them. So if you were rich in America, and you were rich enough to put money in Switzerland, you were very rich.
Why didn't you get any deal, as a matter of fact? Why did you have to go to prison?
Well, because, again, these are civil servants within the Department of Justice. They're angry. They're bitter. They don't get paid much money, and they see a young guy coming in from Switzerland living a great life, and they're a bit jealous, or a lot jealous. That's the first thing. And you begin to see the dichotomy of the public and private sectors here. So what I was doing was, I was a wealthy gentleman, I was a single gentleman, I came in and tried to help them. But instead, they wanted to take the credit. But by me coming to them, they couldn't take the credit. That was the problem.
On the other hand, you had an important organization, public one in the States, the IRS, which gave you a huge prize. I mean, something doesn't fit.
Well, this is exactly right. That's why the story is so compelling, and your audience, when they understand the dichotomy of the one department in the U.S. government put you in jail, the only one in jail. No one else of my bosses went to jail, and I came to them. They didn't come to them. I came to them with all this information. Then the IRS, another department of the U.S. government, pays me the largest award in history of $104 million, which is the law. And people have to understand that that law was passed after I started my whistleblowing. I started back in March of 2005, and the law was passed in December 2006, a year and a half more later. So people said, well, you just did it for the money. No, I didn't do it for the money. You did it because you were mad. No. Well, I was mad, but it wasn't a vindictive move. It was a principle move, an ethical move. And I think here in Romania, a lot of people understand if you do the right thing, then you're sending a message not only to adults, but to children and the next generation. And I think that's the message I'm sending here, even to help the Romanian government to pass legislation, whistleblowing laws to protect people and to pay them who expose waste, fraud, and corruption in their society.
How was the time you spent in prison?
Well, it wasn't like a prison you see on television.
Yeah.
It was called a camp, and the camp had no prison cells or fences. I was playing bocce every day and playing softball. So you can imagine the U.S. taxpayer was paying for this. That's what made it even more laughable, exactly. So you can see how ridiculous the prison system is in America, and the justice system isn't about justice, it's a business. And that's what people have to understand. The prosecutors and so forth all try and make a name and then go into private practice to defend the people they should have prosecuted.
So you got 104 million from IRS.
That's correct.
May I kindly ask that, what did you do with all this money? I mean, did you invest it? Did you keep it in Swiss banks?
No,
okay.
I didn't put the money in Swiss banks, but what I did do was I took care of a lot of people. Personally, my family members, I made sure that they had monies, and close friends of mine, as well as a few select charities I gave monies to. So that was the first thing I did right from the beginning. But now I've invested in real estate and private equity.
Did you pay taxes for all this money?
Oh, yes. I paid over $30 million in taxes.
Wow, that's quite something.
Well, that's it. And of course, I've, as a result of my whistleblowing, they've brought in over $15 billion to the U.S. government, let alone any other country in the world that has been successful in getting these monies due to my historic whistleblowing.
Which leads us to my next question. Your disclosure of the secret banking, tax evasion, led to a turning point in the history of banking. What happened in practical terms?
In practical terms, what's happened is, in Geneva, 200,000 people where I lived, there was 130 banks in 2008. As of today, there's around 80 banks. So 50 banks have vanished, either merged or gone bankrupt. That's the first thing that's happened. The second thing that's happened is various other countries have gone after UBS and other Swiss banks to say, we want our monies back into our own government, our own treasuries, because this is the rightful way to bring these monies back. The third thing that happened was there was an automatic exchange of information, meaning countries can petition to Switzerland and demand that information. This is unheard of, never happened before. And in America, in particular, we had 3 amnesty programs. So those amnesty programs actually brought in over 100,000 taxpayers and over $10 billion. So you can imagine, we only had 19,000 clients only. That was a large amount. But yet, as a result of my actions, and the IRS did a press release, you can see it on my website, 100,000 people came in, Americans, to declare their monies. There's not one person in American history that's done more to make America great than Brad Birkenfeld.
For some years, you practically helped rich people to avoid taxes, isn't it?
I helped them set up facilities, and if they evaded their taxes, that was their question.
Okay.
Because they signed their tax returns. I don't sign their tax returns.
What do you feel? Is your morality intact?
Well, oh, absolutely, because not only was I a part of a legal system in Switzerland, let's go with the facts. This was a legal system in Switzerland which I operated under, but this was going on for decades, even before I was alive. So they can't point the finger at me and say, oh, I came up with this idea of Swiss private banking. So that's the first thing. The second thing is when I saw there was a problem, I challenged it as a director of the bank. I had a $10 million signature power. I was paid a lot of money. I managed a lot of money. But I said, this is not right. I'm challenging it. And I did challenge it. And I have it all in writing. I can prove it to you if you'd like to see it someday. But then the other point was they wouldn't answer me. So if you ask anyone a question in your corporation here, or your mother, or a girlfriend, and they don't answer you, there's something wrong. And you ask them a second and a third time, and they still don't answer you. That's when I said, that's enough. So I politely resigned and left the bank. Then I sent the complaint to the board of directors of the bank. I didn't have to do that, but I was unemployed. I was outside the bank.
Yeah.
So why would I have done that then? Why wouldn't I just walk off into the sunset? Because it was principally correct, ethically correct. And that's what I did. And then they called an investigation and buried that investigation. So that's when I went to my own government and said, this, enough's enough. So that's when it really happened. So you have to understand the timeline. It's very important for your audience to see a cause and effect relationship between what happened, what I did, and so forth.
Very honestly, Mr. Birkenfeld, when you are with yourself, do you feel any type of remorse?
Oh, I should have exposed more. What I did was, in some people's eyes, being a traitor to the system. Yes, I understand it. I've heard everything. But what people don't understand is that I was the one who took the fall. This business could not continue the way they were doing it. They were being too aggressive and breaking the laws and so forth. So what I think is that I never should have gone to the Department of Justice. That was a mistake. I went to other agencies in the U.S. government, which were much more accepting and helpful.
What was their official position? Why did they put you in jail?
Well, they charged me with a conspiracy charge, and they lied.
Can you translate that?
A conspiracy charge is something that they set it up years ago for the mafia. I mean, they couldn't get the big mafia bosses in the States, so they said, we can indict you with a conspiracy, meaning if you have evidence, you don't need evidence to do it. You don't need a witness. You have to prove your innocence on a conspiracy charge. So if you're selling drugs and I happen to be sitting at the bar next to you, they can indict me and say, you're part of the conspiracy because I knew you when I was having a drink with you. I said, well, I had nothing to do with this. So you see how loose this is. And this is the only country in the world that has a conspiracy charge like this. So they can pretty much indict anybody at any time. That's abuse of power. That's too strong. And what happened, that's a very scary system. So what I said to them was, okay, you're indicting me for doing what? I opened a bank account for this billionaire? Now, I had bad legal counsel, and they were afraid that I was going to sue them, which I did. But the problem was that they had me plead guilty immediately, which I shouldn't have done. That was the mistake. But anyways, that's what happened. So now the next step is this, is that when you look at it, you can see the lies that were perpetuated by them. How is it that I was hiding this client when I was sitting in the Department of Justice headquarters in Washington? That's what they said. It made no sense. What was I supposed to do? Go to my client and say, oh, by the way, I'm talking to the authorities about you and all the other clients? So it makes no sense. It's a circus is what it is. And this is the problem with the system. The judges were selected. I was indicted in Florida. I had nothing to do with Florida. They pick that jurisdiction and that judge because they're going to be favorable to the Department of Justice. So this is not about justice. This is about a lynching. And the proof is in my book, which you've read, which now your people can read, your audience can read, and understand how in-depth I get about the corruption in America. It's extremely powerful, and I'm proof of that. And I can go into greater details, and my website does as well. And this is what people are starting to understand and said, wait a minute, As you said rightly, how do you put one guy in jail and then pay him the biggest award in history?
Yep.
It makes no sense. And that's the American justice system.
I will kindly ask you to explain something. There are absolutely typical normal people working for a normal wage, working for a normal salary. Many of them would have lots of problems paying their taxes, trying to pay the taxes for their kids in the schools and stuff like that. These people, all people, hear at a certain moment about a financial crisis. Money for a typical person is something very palpable, very physical. What is money, as a matter of fact, Mr. Birkenfeld?
Well, for your audience, as you rightly point out, it is...
I mean, there's also metaphysical money. Please tell me about that.
Yes. Well, I think when I go through Bucharest, and I've traveled here many times over many years, and I enjoy Bucharest, and I see a lot of poverty, and it is sad. And it's something that needs to be corrected. Hence why whistleblowing is so important to expose waste, fraud, and corruption in our society. But for the average person who is trying to pay the health bills and pay the education and food and so forth, it's a very difficult task. And I think what happens is it's hard for them to relate to such a story like this, absolutely, because the monies and the numbers are so great. It's really something they've never seen.
Out of the power of understanding sometimes.
Incomprehensible, exactly. And I agree with that because there's certain people in this world that are ultra wealthy, and that's an interesting component of this. But what it comes down to is if you fix these problems at that level, it will help them. It won't be adversely affecting them. It'll help them by bringing monies back to the people. Hopefully, the politicians manage that effectively. So that's why, again, whistleblowing is good to weed out the waste, fraud, and corruption, bring society up, and bring the monies back to the taxpayers. That's how it works. And in America, it's been one of the most successful laws since 1862, when Abraham Lincoln started the first whistleblowing law.
Yep.
But to come back to the Romanian people, it's very important for them to have a feeling that their government represents them. In every country, a lot of people feel disenfranchised, left out, ignored. I understand that. So what we need is smaller governments who are proactive to help the people. Help the people who are in need, not the businessman that needs the license for a bigger building or a license to import-export, but to help the school systems.
On the other hand, should we blame rich people?
No, we shouldn't. But they're easy targets, and I've seen this, and I think it's always nice to see people work hard and make money.
Yep.
My grandfather's a perfect example. He left this country with nothing. I can only imagine what it was like for him to travel to America with his stepsisters. But then he worked hard, and he opened a dress shop, and then he opened a nursing home, and he raised my father, who became a successful neurosurgeon, who then raised 3 boys, I being the youngest. So this is a great story. This is a Romanian story. This is a powerful story to send a message to people that there is hope. There is a chance. If you work hard, maybe there's some luck in there, maybe the right place, right time. I understand. But at least my story, and that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm happy to be on your show, is to tell them, look, keep working, go to school, do the right thing, and maybe something will happen for you. Maybe travel a bit and get an experience that will help you in life. And hopefully, it will come together and they'll be successful.
Let us get back to the idea of the metaphysical money. I mean, when you talk about something totally very difficult to understand, I'll give you an example, subprime. What is subprime for a typical person? I mean, when you hear about huge amounts of money, about the roots of a crisis, how will you explain that?
The problem is that in the world of finance, it has become so sophisticated with subprime, derivatives, options, and so forth. You have these very, very sophisticated structures set up by investment banks to garnish large fees. It does help some governments and corporations to develop their business, to leverage their business, and so forth. There's a lot of speculators as well in the markets, the commodities market, the currency markets, the stock markets, and so forth. So these are very sophisticated means involving very advanced math and so forth. So
is it real money or fictional money? How will you define that?
Well, it's real money. There's real losses there, and we saw it in 2008 and 9 that banks went, Lehman Brothers vanished and Bear Stearns vanished, these two big investment banks in America. But it's also real because you have people who are being paid salaries, who buy homes, who buy cars, and so forth. But I know what you're saying is the numbers are so grand, they're almost hard to imagine. And the problem is on spreadsheets, they're just numbers, yes. But if something goes bad, someone's going to have to be paid. And that's the problem. And generally speaking, what we've seen throughout history, in my lifetime, we have seen governments bail these bad actors out, as we say. Because what happens is there's so many people who are adversely affected. Subprime example. When all the mortgages went very, very low, people were losing their homes, couldn't afford to pay for them and so forth, and they paid a high price, and then the whole market crashed because they said some false things, the credit ratings and their salaries and so forth. So what happens is that when you have these mega crises, there's so many people who are adversely affected, it's hard to come back from that. And we're still feeling the effects of that. But yes, I would still say, is it a pile of cash in the corner? No. But there's actually contractual arrangements between banks and governments and corporations. And when something goes bad, as I said, it goes very bad.
I would be very interested in your personal, not necessarily as a banker, but in your personal understanding of what money is. How would you define money?
Well, if you want the dictionary term, it's a medium of exchange, as we've always heard that terminology.
I want your definition.
Well, my definition is it buys you the needs, first and foremost, of what we need, meaning food, shelter, and clothing. It gives me an opportunity to get those things I need. When I want to eat, I give money, I get something. I need to buy clothes, I pay money, I get clothes, or a roof over my head, or what have you. Those are the essential needs, as we say, in society. But money, in another way, is a tool. It's a mechanism to possibly bribe somebody, extort somebody, to take advantage of somebody. And money corrupts. Generally speaking, we've seen it all the way back to the Romans and the Greeks. Money corrupts. Because if you don't have something and you want it, this gives you the opportunity to take advantage of somebody. So we've seen this many, many times, whether it's in the nefarious businesses of prostitution, drugs, guns, human trafficking, terrorist financing. So all of these factors come into it. So a lot of people now are arguing, should we really have a floating currency? So the issues come now to situations like oil as a perfect example. It's based in dollars predominantly. Now China wants to base it in their currency, the yuan. So this is a dynamic shift if we go from dollars to Chinese yuan in buying oil. So these are governmental decisions, these are geopolitical decisions, and of course the banks are there eager to make money on deals. So coming back to your original question, what is money? It's a variety of things that help us with needs, wants, and then abuses.
What would you answer if somebody tells you something like this? And I will try a virtual quotation. You got rich by doing secret banking, tax evasion. You got scared at a certain moment, and you betrayed your Swiss employers, though you were their accomplice. And you disclosed secret information in order to get some big money from the American authorities because you knew you will get it.
That's a false statement, and I'll tell you why it's false. The first thing is, as I said earlier, if you're betrayed by your employer, a spouse, a business person, partner, you can't trust them anymore. That's first and foremost. That is an ethical standard, trust. So if you don't trust your own employer, in this case UBS, how do you continue to work with them? That's number one. Number two, the very fact that they had hid a document in our intranet which contradicted everything we did shows that they had an agenda to protect themselves, but not to protect the colleagues, the clients, and the shareholders. So again, they can't say they didn't know what was going on. They always say it was a compliance issue. No, it wasn't a compliance issue. It was called complying with the law, and they weren't. It's a fact. And you can go see all the Senate hearings in America where they apologized and gave all these wonderful flowery speeches. They wrote a check for $780 million, which was nothing for them. Nothing. It should have been billions. Credit Suisse paid $2.6 billion, and they had half the assets. So again, not only did I do the right thing, sure I worked in that industry, it was legal in Switzerland. The whistleblowing law did not pass until a year and a half later. I was already out of the bank. I had started my whistleblowing a year and a half prior to that. So there is a false statement right there. Then the fact that what I brought forward was I didn't disclose secret information. I disclosed information that was given to me by the bank. I never disclosed one client name without a subpoena, except for one gentleman who was doing illegal oil sales with Saddam Hussein, who had a $50 million condo in New York City. But the Department of Justice never went after him. Their answer to me was, we're not interested in non-Americans. And my answer to them was, well, were you interested in the gentleman that flew the planes into the World Trade Center? They were non-Americans. So you see how...
At a certain moment, you had a conversation with the sister of Osama bin Laden, if I remember correctly?
In Geneva, it was a very large family, of course. They had many, many siblings. And I had a discussion with her in a bar in Geneva, and we got into a bit of an argument because she was telling me how she felt as though that was not a good thing, but it was going to happen, that this terrorist attack on 9/11. And I said to her, well, what happened?
She said the world hates America.
And the world
And
hates...
you answered back?
And I said, well, what if someone flew a plane into Mecca? How would you like that? And she just looked at me, and we got into a very verbal confrontation. So I said, look, you know, if you don't like America, that's one thing. But flying a plane and killing innocent people, that's another thing. And that's not going to be accepted. So, you know, you go back and forth on these issues. But coming back to the point about I did this and betrayed the bank and my colleagues, no. To the contrary, I actually protected them. They were protected because I'm the one who took the hit. They were all exposed, most of them married with families. What do you think would have happened to them? So I was actually the man doing the right thing and say, look, this business can't continue the way we're doing it. There's a proper way and an improper way. And we were doing it improperly when I challenged going to America, and that's when I resigned. And again, why would I resign over $1 million a year? I was living a great life. Why would I quit that? So the argument that I betrayed it and so forth, I was angry. Sure, I was angry because they lied to me. Anyone lies to you, you be angry. Anyone listening to your program, if there's someone lying to them, they're angry. Right?
It should be like that.
Well, you would hope it is, because then it's a moral compass.
Okay, the second virtual quotation. You got rich by robbing a bank without even being close to it. It's like robbing it, sitting comfortably in an armchair, eating popcorn and watching TV.
Well, that's a very Hollywood-esque description of my fortune. But yes, I was successful. I used the whistleblowing law to my advantage. It's a law. If you don't like the law, change the law. That's the first thing. The second thing, it's the most successful law in American history. Nothing comes close. And that goes back to Abraham Lincoln, as I said, in 1862. But the point is this, is that what has happened is, yes, I did effectively garnish monies from UBS without even using a gun, let's say. That's what many people tell me. And I said, yes, I quote-unquote robbed a bank. But no, what I really did was I came in and I fixed a situation that was illegal. I did the moral and ethical correct thing. And by doing that, what we've done is, I just look at the statistics. Look across the world. This was a $1 trillion industry that I transformed. One man. Now, what if we could find another Brad Birkenfeld in Bucharest, or in Paris, or in Munich, who could come forward and do the same thing, maybe in a different industry? Wouldn't we have a better society? Wouldn't it be a better place to live? If the oil companies dumping oil in the river here and polluting and causing cancer, shouldn't we put an end to that? Shouldn't we stop poor construction where buildings are falling down and people are living in bad conditions? That's what whistleblowers do. They are on the inside. Obviously, they might be a part of it, but then they have the courage to come forward to expose it. And that's the key.
I was watching your hands and thinking of the fact that through those two hands of yours, huge amounts of money have been traveling for some years. And didn't you ever get threatened? I mean, was your life in danger after the disclosure of those information?
No, and I tell you why. Most of these people were very high-end Americans, people like maybe my father or your father, who maybe had legacy accounts from their father, or they had Hollywood actors, or big CEOs of companies. They don't want this to come out. They don't want even to hear the story That's why nobody would publish my book in America, because I started telling the truth. Nobody likes to hear the truth when it hurts. So I was never really threatened directly. And sure, is there a risk? There's always a risk. There's a risk of me getting hit by a car here in Bucharest. It could happen. But so what I do is I take precautions, and I certainly understand that my story now is so big, it's almost as if people don't even want to come near me, because now I've helped so many people, so many governments, and they continue to ask me for my assistance.
What do you understand by precautions?
Well, I don't get into particular details of my security measures. I keep that confidential. But I certainly do take precautions.
But you do have something like this.
Oh, yes. Why wouldn't I? Of course. So I think it's important to do that. But again, unfortunately, I'm going to reflect back on President John F. Kennedy. And he was the President of the United States, and he got killed in broad daylight. And technically, we don't know who did it. I certainly believe that Oswald didn't do it. But anyways, the President of the United States was murdered in broad daylight. We still don't know who did it. So anyone is disposable. If they really want to kill you, they'll kill you.
People seeing you right now and reading your book could say, all banks are the same. I don't know, maybe the question could be, is any bank on the face of the earth something cloudy?
The problem with the banks in the world today is they're not regulated properly. Because what happens is the politicians go work for the banks, and the bankers then go work into politics. So they're in bed together. That's the first problem. And I would break that seal immediately. I wouldn't allow this cross-fertilization, as we say. That's the first thing. The second thing is I would make sure that the regulations are so harsh. If you break the law, not only are we going to put a few of you in jail, but we're going to fine you so excessively, you're never going to want to do it again. It's like a child that has a piece of candy.
Yeah.
You punish them and say, go to your room or what have you. You have to put a penalty on these people who are sophisticated, well-educated, rich people in the banks. They know what they're doing. They can't tell us they didn't know what they were doing. So the people need to say, no, we've had enough. We're paying the price of their bad behavior, and we want it changed. And the only way to change it is set up a committee, even of whistleblowers, and promote more whistleblowers to come forward. That would be the first thing. The second thing is to put a regulatory panel together to control these people and keep them on a short leash, as we say, because obviously they can't regulate themselves, and they take advantage of the system, and the governments would say, we're not here to bail you out anymore. So something has to change, because this has been going on for far too long.
On the other hand, what will you say if somebody understands your message like this? Any person working in a bank is an enemy of a normal human being.
No, that's an extreme statement. I don't think that's a fair statement. People need banks for a variety of things, to pay their bills, to pay for their education, to make wire transfers, and so on and so forth. And
is banking necessary?
Well, it is to a certain extent. We have to save monies, pension plans, health plans. We want to save for the future, for the next generation. So certain banks are needed. How we keep assets, whether it's gold or real estate or actual physical currency, or stocks and bonds, that's a whole other issue. But the point is, we need a banking system that's much more easy to understand, that doesn't take extreme risks, does not put the shareholders and clients at risk, and provides a service. That's what banks are made for. Not to rip off clients, but to provide a service. We need to go back to that.
The money out of the Romanian copyright for your book will go to a foundation helping homeless and abused persons. Why did you do that?
I thought that was critical to do here in Romania, because a lot of people, women and children, suffer here. And I think by promoting my story and my book, taking those proceeds to that foundation is so important. And I think it'll send a message to people. I hope we sell 5 million books in Romania, and all that money will go to that charity. Why? Because if we do not promote these charities who are helping women and children, what are we here for? What are we doing? So this is so important, and the publisher, Minerva, was very nice. Christina, who works at Minerva for me, she was the one who helped me do this, and she gets a lot of the credit to bring this together. And this was my idea to work with her to do this, and now we're so happy that this is now in place.
Mr. Birkenfeld, my last question is something like this. If somebody watches you right now and says something like, Mr. Birkenfeld, we live in a free world. I respect what you did, but I don't believe you. What would you answer?
They don't believe what I did or what I'm saying?
Yeah, what you're saying.
Oh, well, it's true. What you can look at first and foremost is the charity. That's the first thing. Now, that's a small token that I can do and help Romania, as well as maybe give some monies to the charity and so forth. So that's one issue there.
Okay.
But if you look what I did in my life as a courageous man, I took on the biggest bank in the world, the biggest government in the world, and they attacked me. So that's the first thing people have to understand. Say, wait a minute. I talked to a girl the other day at one of my lectures, and she said, oh, I'd never do what you did. I said, why? I'd be too afraid. I said, see, that's the point. We need to change that mentality. I don't want people to be afraid. I don't think people should be intimidated and harassed, or women beaten, as this charity helps to support them, or homeless children. No, we're not going to put up with this. And I will be a voice, and I'll be out in front of people. I'll meet with politicians for free. I'll advise governments for free. I'll sit with people for free. My time is free. We need to change this. So if people want to challenge me, people want to say that I'm wrong, try me. I'll be happy to talk to people in a public forum so that everyone can hear it. This is important for society. I've made a huge change in the world. I will continue that change. This change will go on, and I'll continue around the world making change.
Mr. Birkenfeld, thank you so much for accepting this invitation in our program. It's been a pleasure to meet you.
It's a gracious opportunity to be here, and thank you for you and your audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tuturor celor care sunt alături de Garantat 100%, mulțumim frumos pentru încredere. Ne vedem data viitoare. La revedere!
Mă gândesc că ok,